One of the things about our show is it's going to be unique.
You are what you do. You can say any amount of things that you want to say, but what you do is what everybody sees.
People are like, oh, I'm just going to JV it. Like, it's just JV it. Like, what the hell does that mean?
I cannot tell you how excited I am to hang out with you guys today, so thank you so much.
Well, then that end buyer could come back and say, well, I didn't fully understand that it was subject to.
That's not a thing. Like, the SEC has thought of all of these things. They've been here since 1932.
And you can do what you want with your property.
Buyers have time, they have negotiating power, they have options.
Oh my gosh, I am blown away by your inexperience, and they've been in business 20 years.
And that includes things other people put on your property, right? It's your property, okay? Suddenly, Cousin Jimmy's in a lawsuit.
A novation is replacing one contract or one obligation with another.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yes.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, our topic is real estate financing made simple. I'm Andy Fowler, and I'm here with Sean St. Clair. If you're new to the show, make sure to like our channel and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and X. On each of those platforms, we're at the handle @InRem Podcast. That's @InRem Podcast. Also, you can download an audio version of the podcast, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other major platform. Go there, like, subscribe, download that podcast. Helps us out a ton. With that, we're going to go to Sean, who has our legal update.
Thank you, Andy. So my legal update today is basically a follow-up on my legal update last week. Last week, I talked about the Corporate Transparency Act, and I gave a reminder that, hey, look, the deadline's coming up, December 31. Make sure to file your information with FinCEN. And lo and behold, literally hours after I gave that legal update, federal court out of Texas issued a nationwide injunction basically prohibiting the federal government, or more specifically the Treasury Department, from enforcing the Corporate Transparency Act and staying any deadlines to file beneficial ownership information with FinCEN. So what does this mean? So at this point, we have an injunction. It is a temporary order. So it's not something that is permanent, but it basically stops the enforcement of the Corporate Transparency Act. So that means presently, as we speak, when you form an LLC, you don't have to file your beneficial ownership information with FinCEN. So there's no, 30-day or 60-day time limit for filing that. You don't, for those that have LLCs that are already in existence that haven't filed their information with FinCEN, at that point, right now, at least, you don't have to file by the end of the year. So that date is stayed. But we're kind of in a holding pattern, essentially, because of the injunction. So this could go one of two ways. The first is that we do end up with a final order from the court finding that it's unconstitutional, and no appeal from that order by the Department of Justice, which could potentially happen with the new administration coming in. Or we could end up with a ruling that no, the Corporate Transparency Act is constitutional, and the removal of the injunction. And that can either happen through the local district court, or it could happen up on appeal if the Department of Justice does, in fact, decide to appeal the ruling up to the higher appellate or circuit court. That would then review even whether the injunction was valid, and then make that determination. Or if there's a ruling in the case that it's constitutional or unconstitutional, then that ruling can get appealed. So basically, we're going to kind of sit and wait, and there's nothing to be done right now. But if the court does ever, or whether the district court or a court on appeal, or even the United States Supreme Court, if they ever come back and say that the Corporate Transparency Act is constitutional and filing must happen, then at that point, there's going to be a date that's going to be set, presumably by the court, because you're having a bunch of people who are not doing anything now because of this injunction. There's going to be a date. They're going to say, okay, for all LLCs that fall under the Corporate Transparency Act, whether formed prior to 2024 or formed in 2024 or thereafter, where no reporting's been done, you have this date that you're going to have to then report. So there could still be an obligation to report, but as we sit here right now, that reporting obligation doesn't exist because there is an injunction barring enforcement of the Corporate Transparency Act nationwide. So basically, we're kind of in a wait and see situation. And the good news is right now, there's not a mad rush to file. When you form LLCs now, you don't have to file. And we're just going to have to, see how it works its way through the court system and what the result is at that point.
All right. Thank you, Sean, for the legal update. With that, a couple of announcements for you, the listener, to be prepared for. Today, it's Tuesday, so every Tuesday at 3:00 p.m., we have the Creative Finance Collective. What is the Creative Finance Collective? That is a live opportunity for professionals, attorneys, basically, in the space of creative finance to get together and talk about what they're seeing, what they're doing, ways that they can make their work product better. But what we're really there for is to answer creative finance questions from you, the listener. So if you've ever had a question, maybe about how it works, or maybe a unique situation that you've run into and you want to understand how that might play out in a particular jurisdiction, if we're an attorney from that jurisdiction, we might be able to help you. If not, we might be able to refer you to one. In any event, we're there to answer questions and talk through creative finance. So make sure to join us. You can watch that on YouTube, X, or Facebook. It's critical that you're there to ask questions because we're on only as long as we're getting questions. So make sure to join us then. Also, if you have questions today for Sean or I or our guest regarding our topic, we're going to be taking those questions in the final 15 minutes of the episode. So post those questions in the chat. You don't need to wait till the end of the episode. Do it now. We're monitoring those questions, and we'll get to those in the final 15 minutes, should we have any. All right, so we're talking about real estate financing specifically today, and wanted to devote an entire episode to that. And with us to discuss that topic is real estate investor Stephen Hunt. Stephen, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I am so pumped to be here. So thank you guys for having me. This is really exciting. I'm with two of the best real estate attorneys in the entire state of Arizona, if not the country. So what a better place to be on a Tuesday at 10, right?
Well, that is awfully nice of you to say so. Not overstating it in the slightest. Stephen, this is the first time we've had you on your show, our show. So for our listeners, if you would, tell them a little bit about yourself, how you got into doing what you do and what you focus on in real estate.
Wow, what a loaded question. But yeah, so I am a real estate investor here in Phoenix, Arizona. And my biggest goal with real estate investing is to acquire, buy, and hold properties. So coming into real estate, I got into real estate almost 3 years ago now. Before that, I was doing medical sales. I've always had a whole sales career. And I thought that if I made as much money as possible, eventually I could start buying some rentals and eventually scale out that portfolio and hopefully retire by the time I'm 60. But if I go back then, this is during the COVID time, I ran into Pace Morby, who's a local investor out here as well. He's national now. A lot of people know who he is at this point in time. But he really opened up my eyes to say, hey, you don't have to do the strategy that you think you're doing. You can actually just get started right now. You can make a whole living just doing real estate right now without being an agent and just focusing only on investing full time. So eventually just made that shift over to just investing full time, got into buy and hold real estate, was doing a lot of BRRRR strategy, which is when you buy, you renovate, you rent, you refinance, and you repeat the entire process. Bought about 23 rental properties doing that strategy my first year. And then after that, I realized I made a mistake by holding onto every single property because there's a lot of expenses that come along with buy and hold investing. You don't just get the property and fill it and everything's great. Things still go wrong. There are vacancies, things happen. So eventually switched that strategy to primarily flipping all the time. Unless I run into the perfect deal where it's a no-brainer to keep that deal, I typically am just going to be flipping those properties most of the time now at this point.
Now, I take it the market probably dictates a little bit some of your strategy, or you probably kind of adapt your strategy to what the market gives you. Is that really kind of what you're focusing primarily on right now in this market, is the flipping?
Primarily in this market, I'm focusing on the flipping. And yeah, the market does play a huge role in this. And I definitely had to make some pivots. I've definitely lost some money in the market shift. Now, if we go and rewind back to 3 years ago, I got into real estate right when the rates went up. So I didn't get the fun, the fun ride that everybody else got to go on where they were flipping a house. And during that 3-month renovation, the house appreciated another $30,000. I didn't get to enjoy any of that. So I had to be very, very specific on my numbers. I had to learn how to deal with what was being thrown at me at that point in time. And I feel like we found a really good balance right now to where we can have consistent returns. We haven't lost any money in the past year and a half now. Everything that we've done has been completely profitable, which is great. So I'm glad I got to learn those lessons early on versus having to have this inflated viewpoint of how flipping works and then have to relearn it all over again.
Well, I think a lot would say that probably makes you a better investor. Those that are born in the the video game market where you just press play and you go make money, that's kind of what the real bull real estate markets sometimes look like, especially during the last one where you could make bad decisions and still make money. You really can't make those bad decisions in this kind of market.
No, you have to be extra conservative right now. So I always run my numbers very conservatively. If I can get a little bit more at the end of the day when I'm finally done with the project, that's great. But at least I know, hey, I've covered all bases, and I don't have to worry about it. And so, yeah, I think it does make you a better investor. It's made me very particular on the types of deals that I take on. I know there's a lot of folks out there where volume is truly the game for them. They don't care if they lose on 3 because they made on 7. So for me, I don't want to do too crazy a volume. I like to do about 20 flips a year, which is very manageable for just a one-man show for the most part. So I really enjoy that route and just very particular on the deals that I take on, the locations that I go to. I've learned my lessons on the locations that I don't like. I like things to be nearby so I can go visit them, and just have very reliable sources of being able to sell the property. I know what areas work out really well. I know what areas take a long time to sell.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I understood that you do a podcast as well.
Yeah, we do have a podcast. It's called the Explain It Podcast, and it's me, Stephen Hunt, and Ingrid Hernandez, who's another investor. I believe she was just on your show actually too, which is really awesome. I think I'm actually even just following her. I think she was last week. So me and Ingrid Hernandez, we run that podcast and we bring really anybody we possibly can and that really would help other investors. So if we're learning about whole life policies, if it's different lenders, if it's different fix and flippers, different buy and hold investors, we love to bring in different strategies and have people break down and explain how they're doing those strategies and see how we can also selfishly incorporate them into the way that we're investing, but be able to provide that for all the viewers as well.
Now, where can folks go to find that, and when do you guys usually air that?
Yeah, so that's going to be on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. We go live every single Wednesday at 1 p.m. Arizona time. And you can always catch the replay on my YouTube channel, which is going to be youtube.com/Stephen_Hunt, or you can actually check it out on Ingrid's YouTube channel as well. I can't tell you I have her URL memorized off the back of my hand, but it'll be in both places.
Awesome. Super cool. And if you're watching, make sure to check out that podcast. Great information. All right. So let's get into our topic. We're talking about real estate financing. And I know you've have some thoughts about this and kind of developed your own method such that it's even referred to by some as the Hunt method. So why don't you tell us, let's get into real estate financing. Tell us about the Hunt method and what that is.
Yeah. So great topic. And we can go so deep on this. But when I originally got into real estate, I was focusing more on the creative finance side of things, right? I met Pace Morby. So of course, Pace Morby told me all things great about creative finance, loved it, loved everything that I was learning, tried out a few of those strategies, but ended up really leaning heavily on working with banks. I really enjoy working with banks. My wife and I were very bankable. We are very responsible when it comes to personal finances as well. So working with private money lenders, hard money lenders, and then just different types of banks for different lines of credit as well was something that we were really, really interested in. So if we fast forward, I have a business model where I help seniors afford long-term care. And that's how I go meet with a lot of my sellers, and a lot of the properties that I end up purchasing is through those referrals. And one of the referrals I was given needed to close within 4 days. She didn't need all the cash in a lump sum. She was okay taking payments. So it was clear for us to do a seller finance deal in that situation. And a seller finance deal, for anybody that doesn't know, is essentially where instead of me going to a bank and getting a loan, I am just doing a loan in the name of the seller. So I'm essentially paying the seller on a monthly basis for whatever the equity is on that property. Now, this property was free and clear. The property was worth, I'm going to use easy numbers here, it was worth about $500,000. And I said, hey, this is what I can pay you on a monthly basis. She was fine with that. She just needed to offload the property. It was a great rental property for me as well. I still own it to this day. And we were making monthly payments to her of $1,500 a month. And so I was cash flowing about $500 a month on that property. We had it rented for $2,000. So already a great deal. I had no money out of my pocket. I didn't have to go qualify for a bank loan. I'm making payments directly to her. The house was already in great shape. I was able to slap a tenant in there within a month. So already a great deal that most people would love. Well, we fast forward about 6 to 8 months, and the seller, or the seller's daughter, I should say, reaches out to me and says, "Hey, is there any chance you can pay us an extra $500 a month? My mom's level of care went up. She's in this assisted living community, and we're just short about $500. Is there anything you can do?" Now, most real estate investors would say, absolutely not. No, there's no way. This is what we agreed to. I'm sorry, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. But for me and my business model, I wanted to make sure that I was trying to help her as much as I possibly could. So even if that meant I was just going to pay out of pocket an extra $500 a month, to me, there's no harm, no foul. Yes, I'm not cash flowing anymore, but it's all going towards the principal. This was a 0% interest seller finance deal. So I'm like, it's just going to pay down the house a little bit faster. But can I be a little bit more creative here? Can I make this more advantageous to me? So one of the ideas that I had, because I'd been doing some of the creative finance and working with different notes secured by the deed of trust, just unsecured notes, all this kind of stuff. I was raising private money. I had an idea where I go, well, can I move her note secured by the deed of trust, the seller finance note? Can I move that note off of the property, and can I secure that to my LLC, or can I cross collateralize it across my other properties in my portfolio? Is that something that's actually feasible to do? So I called around to multiple different title companies. Hey, could we write this up? Hey, what would this look like? And everybody gave me the same answer and said, yeah, you can move the note. You can have it secured by whatever you want to have it secured by, essentially. So I went back to the seller and I said, hey, I can't do the $500 a month, but what I can do is I can up you to $3,000 a month. That way you don't have to worry about any more increases in your mom's level of care. That should be able to cover everything. And she also had Social Security and a 401k. She was actually in a really good position compared to most sellers that I do work with. So I said, I'll up it to $3,000 a month. The only difference here is that my company is going to have to pay you, not the house. And I explained it that way because I told her, right now I have tenants in that property and they pay me on a monthly basis so that I can pay you on a monthly basis. If you're okay with my company, my LLC, paying you on a monthly basis, I can up this to $3,000 a month, same terms, 0% interest. But I can up it to $3,000 a month. And that way I can take essentially the profits from all of my properties and pay you that much more. Is that something that you'd be open-minded to? And what do you think her answer was to that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Who wouldn't, right? She's like, yeah, this is double. Oh my gosh, we're doubling the amount. And that's triple what I was asking for in my increase. So to her, it was a no-brainer. So we went ahead, we updated everything. We went to our servicing company, we switched it all over. And the reason why I did that is because now that property appears to be free and clear. I've moved the note off of the property. So now we have a property that has no debt attached to the property. That debt is now attached to my LLC instead. And I pay her every single month. She's happy. We have it serviced the same exact way as if this was a real estate deal. Same exact servicing company, Westar, here locally in Phoenix, but now the property appeared to be free and clear. So that opened up a ton of different doors, because when we have a free and clear property, now I have the opportunity to go do either a cash out refinance. I can go get a line of credit. There's so much that I can do in these situations. And that's exactly what I did. I went and I ended up getting a line of credit on the property. And they lend up to 80% at this time. They lend up to 80% loan to value. So if I have a $500,000 house, now I can go get a $400,000 line of credit. And I'm not paying any interest on that line of credit until I start using that line of credit. So that was the beauty of it. It gave me access to the liquidity that I needed so that I could continue on in a more affordable approach for the rest of my real estate transactions. Instead of me going and raising private money for 1 or 2 points origination and 12% interest, now I have this bank essentially of $400,000 that I can go use for my fix and flips or to pay down my other rental properties. And that's ideally what I use it for, is to pay down the other rental properties. And I can break down kind of the strategy behind that as well.
Stephen, thanks for explaining that. That's it's impressive how you figured all that out and were able to free that property up. And we were talking off camera that you talked about the hunt method before at a conference that you and I both spoke at. And like I said, I think that of every mechanism, formula, plan to buy real estate, creatively, yours, in my view, is the simplest. And it sounds like now you're using a lot of your lines of credit for your fix and flips and things like that. But have you ever used that line of credit to go and acquire other properties through like cash offers?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually my favorite way to do it. Um, Now, for me, the way that it works, and now if I did not have the portfolio that I currently have, I've sold a couple of my properties from that first year when I mentioned I had 23. I brought it down to 17 because it was more manageable for me. So for me, I didn't want to go focus on finding more properties. I just said, okay, what are my properties that have the highest interest rate? Which ones could I make cash flow better if I just paid them off?
Mm.
Right. So that's what I did. I went and I took that line of credit and I went and paid off a couple additional assets. What's the benefit of me going and paying off a couple additional assets, doing it that way? Well, number one, my payment decreased because I don't have the DSCR loan that was more expensive at that time than what this line of credit is. So I go and pay those off. And now I'm taking all the cash flow from that. But that property now also looks like it's free and clear because I'm leveraging debt from another property, the line of credit from property A, and I'm going and paying off property B. So the debt is still on property A. Property B looks like it's free and clear, which gives me the opportunity to go get an additional line of credit, to go get an additional cash out refinance, whatever it is that I want to do. It's just giving me more and more access to the liquidity that I'm looking for. And this can be a process. This can take a few months to be able to get those lines of credit to be pushed through. It does take some time, but it's totally worth it because we're only paying simple interest. So what that means is that our interest is calculated on a monthly basis. So if I have an 8% interest rate on a line of credit, and let's say I close on a flip and I made $50,000 on that flip and I put that towards the line of credit, immediately I'm going to see that result next month in what my payment is. I've immediately taken $50,000 off the principal. So I'm only paying 8% on whatever my new principal amount was, which means my cash flow has all gone up. And I really treat that line of credit like a bank account. That's why I use it for the flips and for the rentals, because the cash flow I'm making from the rentals, if I'm saying, if I have a perfect month where I don't have any repairs or expenses, it would be $9,500 in cash flow that I would make that month. That money goes towards the line of credit. And then whatever I made from a flip that month, that money would go towards the line of credit. So you're paying this down rapidly and you see the immediate result right when you start paying it down as well.
I see all the time, posts on social media where people are, hey, I went to the seller and I offered seller carry, or I offered, subject to, and the seller said this or had this reason why, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't have all those excuses when you show up with cash. So talk to us about the benefits of being able to walk into a transaction or present a seller with an actual cash offer. What are the benefits with that?
Yeah. It's being able to give the seller exactly what they want really, really fast, which is really nice. So instead of me going to a hard money company or going and getting a traditional bank loan or anything like that, there's going to be time that it takes for those underwriters. They have to go get an appraiser out. There's a whole process that goes along with that. Yes, there's some hard money companies out there that can do really, really quick closes. I have some that do 1 or 2 day closes. They're extremely fast. It's great, but they're expensive. It's like 2 or 3 points for the origination. It's like 12, 13% for the interest rate. Here, I don't have to pay any origination. I know I can close quickly and I can legitimately write a check that day for the property, so long as title's clear and all that kind of stuff. I can write a check that right then and there. I can close faster than anybody else can close, essentially, because I have the cash, I have the availability to that liquidity, and I can make that offer and go for it right then and there versus them trying to find the right buyer or anything. So finding a heavily distressed property, which is typically what I'm looking for, so I can get it significantly under market value. I'm looking for houses that are usually about 50 cents on the dollar. Then I can get in there with that money. I can save more money not having to go to hard money companies. I can renovate the property. And now I have this huge equity spread that I can either just refinance the property or I can keep it as a rental and leave that line of credit in use for that property, or I can just sell it and then pay down the line of credit further.
So talk to us about how you manage the lines of credit. You mentioned before, I think I heard you correctly, kind of scaling back some. Sounds like there's a little bit of a process. So give us an idea about how many you typically like to actively manage it? What goes into managing and keeping track with that?
Oh gosh, I would have as many as possible. So this is all a process for everything, just like anything else, right? So right now I have lines of credit spread out kind of throughout. I have one on my primary residence, a typical HELOC that you would look at. I have first lien HELOCs, which is a really, really cool product. And I have a great resource. If anybody wants to reach out to me, you can just reach out to me on Instagram at Stephen Hunt, STEVENHUNT. But have some great resources for that. The first lien HELOC is really cool because it actually replaces the mortgage that's already on the property. So instead of me getting a DSCR loan, I can go and just do this first lien HELOC, and it's already a line of credit. It's already set up the way that I want it to be. So now any money that I make, I can just focus on paying down that specific property. We have 3 lines of credit right now that we're leveraging. They equate close to about $1 million right now for those lines of credit. And managing it, it's not too hard. It's essentially a bank account. You're set up through a bank. So yes, you may have 2 or 3 different banks that you're going through, or eventually you can consolidate that all into one bank. Ideally, the best way to do this is once you really start getting a lot of these properties paid down and you have multiple properties that are free and clear or just a super low loan to value, is you can loop all of that together into what's called a commercial line of credit. So you're pairing all of this together. Almost think of this like a portfolio loan. They're taking the whole portfolio, the value, and they're giving you one big line of credit based off of the value of all the properties that you have. That's really what I'm working towards right now.
Now, will you, throughout this process, and it evolves, it sounds like from start to end game involves a lot of different variables, but will you utilize multiple financial institutions, multiple banks, or will you stick with the main bank that you personally bank with, or is that even a no-no? Do you not even use the bank that you have a relationship with, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I don't actually. So I bank through Chase. Chase is my main bank for my personal finances, for all of my business's finances. And Chase is extremely conservative. And most big banks like Chase, Wells Fargo, and a lot of these banks don't love working with real estate investors. They see it as a high risk opportunity. So it's really, really challenging until you get to a certain level within real estate to start working with the big institutions. So somebody like Chase, if my whole portfolio is free and clear, it's a no-brainer for them. Of course, they throw me several $1 million as a line of credit because it's cross-collateralized, and it's essentially it's guaranteed that they're going to get all their money back and then some on that line of credit. But in the meantime, I had to get a little bit creative, and I had to call around to a lot of smaller banks. I had to go to a lot of the local Arizona banks that are here, and just after, trial and error, you really have to push around to figure out who's going to be able to work with you. Because a lot of these banks too, they don't love the idea of working with real estate investors. But some of them are willing to kind of push you through that process. I'll give you an example here. The one that I just switched over to a first lien HELOC, that process took 4 months. And that was the 3rd company that I'd gone to that I went through the entire process. And they were finally the last company that was able to push that first lien HELOC through, just because they're looking for so many different types of qualifications. And when you're a buy and hold investor, you're typically not paying federal taxes because you have so many write-offs through all the depreciation. So going and walking into a bank and saying, here's my taxes. I took a loss of $400,000 last year. Immediately to them, that's red flags, right? They go, what the heck? What's going on? But if you have somebody in a smaller bank and you can work with their team and their underwriters, they'll really peel back the layers there. They'll start to say, okay, well, he depreciated these assets. He actually made $500,000 from flipping. His wife actually made $200,000 from this. So they're actually making this much money. There's just a lot of different write-offs here. So you want to be able to start building those banking relationships too, so that somebody's pushing for you to really get to that next stage.
If you had advice as far as establishing income streams necessary to qualify for credit, because ultimately, if you're working with a bank, you have to qualify for credit. You can't show up with a $400,000 loss and no other income coming in, right? And you explained that you did have, or at least your wife had some income coming in. You had some other, you could show some cash flow. What's your advice to an investor just starting out, as far as making themselves, credit worthy?
Yeah. Well, number one is going to be getting your shiz together, guys. Most people that I see that are trying to get into real estate investing right now, just starting from scratch, they went and joined a course. Let's say it was even Pace Mortgage course, right? They join there and they see that I can get into properties with little to no money down. I don't need to do any credit checks. I don't need to do any of these things. That can take you so far. is the biggest thing. So as you're working towards that process, if you're somebody that has bad credit, if you don't have any money in the bank, if you don't have any assets or anything like that, you should really focus on getting your personal finances put together first and foremost before you start really trying to trek off into this world of, building a real estate portfolio and all these things. You really need to know how to manage your own personal finances before banks really want to start considering you. So that would be my first piece of advice. If you're somebody that needs to be on Dave Ramsey's baby step number 1, you need to be on Dave Ramsey's baby step number 1. This is a process. I didn't get here overnight. I didn't just have terrible credit and no money coming in and said, hey, will this bank give me all this money? Now, there are banks that will work with you. If you have a free and clear asset, if you do have a situation where you ran into a seller finance deal where you could move that note off of using the Hunt method, as I said, there's a lot more security and you're more likely to be able to get that financed because of the fact that it's a free and clear asset in their mind. It's safe, it's secure. They have a way to secure that debt. So I would focus on just getting your personal finances put together first before you really start trekking off into this world. Once that's put together and you start building up that credibility with banks, it's going to be such an easy time for you, because if you're an entrepreneur, it's already hard for you to get loans as it is. I'm blessed. My wife also still has her W-2 job. We're very strategic about that. But if you're also in your W-2 job and you're wanting to get into real estate financing or get into real estate investing, I should say, it's a great time before you leave your W-2 job. Don't have this dream of just, I want to leave my W-2 job and I want to live free on a beach doing this and this. Focus on what you can control right now and make sure you really give yourself the framework and the foundation that you need so that you can leave that job. And I think the fastest way to do that is by qualifying for these types of loans, doing the first lien HELOC, which if you have a W-2 job should not be an issue for you.
Jumping off of really the same question, how would you counsel somebody new to this method to begin also not just understanding what you just discussed, but understanding the products available? So I guess what I mean by that is it doesn't sound like there is one HELOC that applies in every single situation, right? There are different products for different types of uses and situations. And so there must be a process, especially if you're going to get strategic about it, of knowing what's available, knowing what to look for. Is this just a matter of, look, you're going to need to get on the phone and talk with banks and find out what's available and see what this looks like? Or is there really, what would you do kind of knowing the process now to better learn and understand what the market has to offer when it comes to this strategy?
That is a great question. And ultimately, I think if you want to be a responsible investor and if you want to take your career to the next level within this industry, you should be, just like you mentioned, hopping on the phones, and you should be talking to multiple different banks. You should be networking with other people that are getting real estate financing. There's people here locally in Arizona. Zachary Keeps is a great example. Love talking to him. He is a huge investor here locally. He has roughly 300 single family homes. They're almost all paid off, free and clear. He buys like 5 houses a week for fix and flips. Like, the guy's a machine. He's awesome. But leveraging relationships like that, people that are in your local market, hopping into the Facebook community groups, hey, what banks are you guys working with? And then get on the phones, start building relationships with these people over the phone as well, and seeing what products are available. Every bank is going to have something unique. Every bank's going to have something a little bit different. There's some banks that won't give you any financing at all if it's through an LLC. There's some banks that will do it, easily. Some banks are going to have a 12% interest rate. Some banks are going to have an 8% interest rate. If you want to be the quintessential investor and you really want to scale your portfolio and your operation, you should be building all of these relationships, because at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to you and the people that you know. So I have 5, 6, 7 different banks that I work with on any given point in time. So if I'm getting the rates and if I'm getting what I'm looking for from one bank that I'm going to keep working with them. But as soon as I start to see that shift, which we see a lot, I'm going to start exploring my other options as well. Now, if it's not broke, don't fix it. That's my methodology as well. I'm not trying to overcomplicate the system. So I have a great first lien HELOC person. I'd love to refer them out to everybody. But it's not to say that they're going to be the perfect fit forever and ever and ever. My hard money lender gives me the best refinance rates right now if I was going to do a DSCR loan. It wasn't like that a year ago. I had to go to different people. So I'm constantly exploring that because there's so much opportunity available, and there's a lot of banks that want to grow and will offer incentives in order for you to work with them and do business with them.
So you mentioned lines of credit, but you also referenced doing a cash out refinance, which I take as more permanent financing.
Long term, yeah.
Yeah. When are you wanting to have a line of credit open versus have permanent financing that's more long term? Like what drives that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. Timing. Timing's a big one for me when it comes to that question. I know I can close a DSCR loan, and a DSCR loan is a debt service coverage ratio loan. It's essentially an asset-based loan for anybody that doesn't know. This is a loan that a lot of investors would use for their investment properties. You can close in an LLC. They just want to make sure that it can cash flow, that it has the right debt service coverage ratio, DSCR. Meaning that you're making more than what the loan is actually going to cost you. So as long as you're making more than what the loan is going to cost you, they're going to approve that loan. Obviously, they're going to look at the values of the property, all that kind of stuff too. But I use that if it's the route that I have to go. Most ideally, I would love to make everything a line of credit, but those processes can take a long time. There's a lot of qualifications you have to go through. There's a lot of banking relationships that you have to build to make that happen. So even if it means for me, okay, I'm going to go get this DSCR loan, I'm going to pay, let's call it one origination point, and I have no prepayment penalty. Sometimes I'll just do that because I know that my hard money loan is going to be coming due soon. Or I have cash in there that I just want to be able to recycle and use for the next deal. So I will go ahead and do the DSCR loan and secure long-term financing on it. But then I will still keep my conversations going with all the other banks and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Hey, this is what I'm looking to do. And kind of just keep that process rolling to see who's going to be able to execute it. Because if I can switch that DSCR loan over to a first lien HELOC, I'll do that all day long. That's my first, always number one thing that I want to do. And
why is that? What is the advantage of a HELOC as opposed to permanent financing?
Great question. Yeah, it's going to be the access to liquidity. It's as simple as that. So if I have a property, and we'll use the other example there that I was talking about too, which was the $500,000 house with a $400,000 line of credit. I like having the availability to access the liquidity. So even if I'm using that full $400,000 because I did a first lien HELOC, but now, okay, I had flip number 1 close, I had flip number 2 close, and I had flip number 3 close. And let's say each one of those was a $50,000 profit on all of those flips. So it's $150,000 total. And I put that all towards the line of credit. I've increased all of my cash flow, which is great, right? I love the fact that the cash flow goes up, but I have access to that $150,000. So not only am I making more on a monthly basis, but I have access to that $150,000 so I can go make those cash offers, or I can put that towards another rental property to get it paid off. It gives me so much wiggle room to use all of that money as I need. Now, if I had a DSCR loan or any kind of normal 30-year, fixed mortgage in that situation, and if I put that $150,000 down, there it is. It's in that house. I can't access that. Maybe I could go get a HELOC, but that could be challenging. That might have to be still even deeper for me to get that HELOC. So I'd rather be able to have it all in one single line of credit. So that way I can kind of keep contributing towards it and keep my cash flow increasing, keep the debt coming down, but have access to everything that I'm putting towards it in the meantime as well.
So that's the beauty of the line of credit, is that you can take a big chunk of cash, you can pay down the loan, so you're not earning interest on that money, but it's still fully available to you if you need it.
If you need it, it's there. And you don't have to pay interest on it unless you are using it, which is so great. Let's say you're having a slow season, right? Let's say I only flip 5 houses this next upcoming year. I'm still have access to that liquidity, and I'm not paying any interest on it until I actually need to use that money. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. And I call it the exponential spend down as well. So when you think about compound interest here, or the exponential growth of compound interest, right? You get a dividend paid out on the stock. It goes and it applies to the actual principal value that you invested. So it continues to grow and grow and grow. And now you're gaining interest on the interest that you gained, and then you gain interest on the interest that you gained. I look at it the same way here too, because if I make a payment, or if I contribute an extra $2,000 to the line of credit from my cash flow on that property, my interest payment is going to be just a little bit less. And then the next month, my principal payment that I'm making is going to be a little bit more. So it starts to the principal payment goes up and up and up and up. The interest goes down, 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 down. So all of a sudden we have this curve where it sinks really fast, because all of a sudden now I'm contributing 5,000. Now I'm contributing 5,500. Now it's 7,000. Now it's 8,000 a month. And it really it's crazy how fast you'll pay off these houses. As long as you're making more than what you're spending when it comes to that side of it, you're going to pay these houses down so rapidly. It's awesome.
So do you take So you mentioned you have 17 rentals. Do you take the rents and put those on your lines of credit and then just pull the money over as you need it for each rental property?
Yes. Yep. So I'm actually, and we're in the process of doing this right now, is just converting everything in our life to these lines of credit. And that
Mhm.
might sound risky to some people, but for me, it makes total sense. Um, you could put money into a high yield savings account that might pay you 4%, maybe even 5%. Well, if my line of credit is at 8% or 9%, it would make more sense for me to put that money into the line of credit because now my payment's less on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
So I'm treating it like a bank account. Whatever my wife makes, that's going to go towards the line of credit. Whatever I make off of a flip, that goes towards the line of credit. Whatever I'm making in rents, that goes towards the line of credit because I want to get these things paid down as quickly as possible. I know for a lot of investors, they hate hearing paying it down as fast as possible and having all these free and clear
Mhm.
properties. They're like, why would you do that? The tenant's paying it down for you. What about it freaks people out, and I totally understand that. But think about it this way: if you can just get to 10 free and clear properties, just to begin with, you have 10 free and clear properties. The average house in Arizona is roughly about $500,000. I know it's come down a little bit, but again, we'll
Mhm.
use round numbers. $500,000 for the average house in Arizona, and you have 10 of those. And now we have $5 million worth of properties. We have a $4 million line of credit essentially across those properties. You're out of the rat race.
Mhm.
You're really not having to worry about anybody else. That right there alone is $40,000 a month in cash flow from those. You don't have to really worry too much. You can do investing on your terms. You can do what you want to do when you want to do it. You want to go take on a luxury flip that you buy for $1.5 million and it needs $1 million worth of renovations. You can go do that. You have the line of credit available to you. You don't have to worry about working with all these different banks, and you have all the cash flow that you know is going to pay for it because you got approved on it to begin with. So as long as those factors are working together, to me, I think it's a no-brainer. It takes you out of the rat race. You don't have to worry about the next flip, the next sale, the next here, the next there. You've given yourself a foundation, and you can build off of that at that point in time.
What is the typical duration of a line of credit?
Yeah. So most lines of credit that you're going to see are going to be about 10 years long for the line of credit. And then a lot of those will actually transition after the 10-year mark over to a 30-year mortgage. So they'll
Mm.
actually then switch them over to being an amortized mortgage where you can't take the money out anymore. But after the 10 years comes up, you can always go back and just reapply for the line of credit. You don't have to stick with that forever and ever and ever. So that's exactly what my plan is to do with this. I haven't been in the industry long enough to get to the end of the line of credit just yet. But once we do get to the end of those lines of credit, we're just going to, at that point, go reapply for them. Or if everything's paid off to a certain level, we'll just go to that commercial line of credit that I mentioned before, which is
Mm.
where they take the entire portfolio and give you one bank account essentially just for that.
Are there particular properties or types of properties that obviously there's some that you found work well because you like using the strategy. Are there some types of real estate that just don't work well with this, or you've had issues with, or for whatever reasons the banks don't like them?
Um, it depends on your exit strategy, I will say sometimes. And this is only for some banks. Now, the bank that I just used, they really didn't care what my exit strategy was. They just wanted to make sure we had enough money to cover what was going on. But there's a lot of banks out there. If you're doing co-living, if you're doing senior housing, if you're doing any kind of group home, sober living, anything like that, that don't want to see those things. They see it as more of a risk. They don't like the idea of a company paying the mortgage on a monthly basis, even though they're paying double the market rents, they still won't factor those things in. So a lot of times they don't want to work with those types of exit strategies and those types of tenants. They would rather have more security and have it just be a typical 12-month long-term rental with your standard tenant. That's really the only issues that I see running into it, though. So long as everything cash flows and everything's good, most of these banks are going to be willing to work with you. Of course, they're going to look at your bankability. They're going to make sure that you're a credible person. But I don't see too many issues coming up on these properties. I would always look for the highest value property first. That's kind of what I always target is what properties do I have that have the most amount of equity, that have the highest value, that I think are going to appreciate the fastest, that are going to have the fastest rent growth. So for me, a lot of my small multifamily deals, those are the things that I like to get lines of credit on right away. Or some of my houses that are just unique in terms of, like, the one that I just did was a 6-bedroom property in Phoenix. Section 8 pays out like $4,000 a month on that property. It's insane. And my debt on that is only $270,000. So they were able to give me a sufficient line of credit for that property as well.
Now, will you utilize lines of credit not only for the purchase of the property, but if you're going into rentals, multifamily, and this, I don't know what percentage at the time, but I'm guessing a big percentage of the time you're planning on doing improvements to the property, making renovations, maybe because you got a great deal, because it needs certain work. Are you usually planning on using the line of credit to fund the improvements?
Yeah. So in a perfect world, the answer is yes. But we don't live in a perfect world, and I'm not at the full scaled out version of where I'm trying to head with all of this too. So this is something that I just started implementing, a year and a half ago into my strategy, and it takes time. I wish I was making $5 million a year and I could have everything paid off already by this time frame, but we aren't there. So I will use it as needed. So I still work with my hard money companies. This is why it's important to have banking relationships across the board, because I can still go and take my line of credit and I can go get a loan through a hard money company, come in with a 10% down payment, and then I can fund some of the renovation, as working capital, if you will. And then the hard money company will reimburse on all of that as well. So it really depends on the situation that we're in at that point in time. That is a little bit more costly because we do have the origination points. You do have higher interest rates. You do have some of those factors that come into play. But I would say in a perfect world, once everything is where I want it to be, what I just mentioned with the 10 free and clear properties, I'm not touching a hard money company. There's just no need. There's no need because I don't have to pay the extra fees, the extra points. Like, you guys, if you calculate how much money these banks make on every single flip, I break this down for wholesalers once in a while where I'm like, this is me making $20,000 in profit. Here's who made all the money. It's the bank made $35,000 on it. This person made this much. Title company made this much. So yeah, there's no spread at the very end because the banks are taking so much of that profit. If I can eliminate, that down to 50%, because I'll still have an interest rate that I have to pay. But if I can eliminate that down to 50% of the fees, taken away, I've just increased my profit margins and I've given myself more security in the deals that I'm already doing.
So back during the recession period, and I even got personally caught up in this on a line of credit. The banks, the minute they saw depreciation in the market, they sent out letters to all of their borrowers who had lines of credit, notifying them that effective immediately, they're cut off. No notice, like it arrived in the mail, and then I went to access my line of credit, and sure enough, it was fully cut off and not available to me. So is there a fear that, we could have a market shift and all of a sudden your liquidity is not there anymore? And kind of what's plan B on that?
That's a great question. So in those situations, I'd probably switch back over to some of the DSCR loans because I know those properties would already cash flow. These companies aren't allowing me to leverage myself to a point where they're not in a secure position. So I'd probably just switch back over to DSCR loans on a lot of those properties. However, when it comes to the first lien HELOCs, I actually had this conversation with the last company that I worked with. They never did that because they were in first position. They were the most secure person there. So that's why another aspect to me doing this is I'm trying to do this not as a secondary, lien on the property where they can turn that off. The companies that are doing the first lien HELOCs, the companies that are going to be in first position, even if it's a commercial line of credit, in most cases are not going to wipe that out. And typically too, with banks, I've noticed, I've talked to a few people about this actually. They said, hey, this is what I did when I was in those situations. And it depends on the bank. But they said, as long as I was using a line of credit or I had it out and in use, they weren't going to take it away. They're like, so I kind of just had to weather the storm for a couple of years in that time frame to make sure that it was working for me.
So not everything, well, you mentioned it before. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a fallen world and we have mistakes, but sometimes our mistakes and failures are our best teachers. What has been, in your estimation, your biggest mistake or the biggest thing you've learned kind of in developing this method?
Gosh, well, it's a new method, so I haven't run into too many mistakes with the actual method itself. I will say one of the first times that I ever tried to do this, I actually did a cash out refinance. And I would say that was a mistake on my part. I got the cash. That was cool. There's no tax consequence when it comes to that. I ended up putting it towards a triplex that I own. And that worked out well. It also cash flows. I wouldn't say that I made a mistake in terms of what the outcome of that entire thing was. However, I will say that I hate the fact that I don't have a line of credit on that property. And now if I want to go get a line of credit, I have to go through this whole process because that property appeared to be free and clear. when I did do that process. So I wish I could go back and just get the line of credit doing it that way versus doing the cash out refinance. But I wanted to try this in multiple different ways. And the cash out refinance was easy money. It was right there in front of me. I knew I could get that closed in about a week's time. So I went for it in that situation. Again, it didn't bite me in the butt, but I do wish I just had a line of credit on that instead, because I'd be up a couple $100,000 extra in terms of liquidity that's available to me.
So another question kind of about the process,
Mhm.
knowing, as you've said, that it can take some time. And I guess that amount of time can change maybe depending on your relationship with the bank, so on and so forth. But when you go into this knowing that can take time, are you starting an application process at multiple financial institutions? Is that even feasible? Or is it you go with your best bet? If it doesn't work out, go to the next one, and it's just going to take that extra time?
That's what I did. I hopped from place to place. I didn't do multiple at one time. A lot of them have to run your credit. A lot of them, I didn't want to get any of the information confused. I really tried to be very in tune with what we're going through on the lending process. And that's because it helps me be a better investor in the long run. So I mean, most lenders that I talk to, I end up knowing more about lending than they do, just because I've been through this process so many different times and worked with so many different banks. It teaches you so much, and you see, okay, bank number one, this is the roadblock that we ran into. How can I make sure that we don't run into this roadblock again? Is it something that I need to fix on my end before I go to the next bank? So I would hop from bank to bank doing it that way, just to figure out what were the specific requirements and who did I think was going to be the best fit. And then just kind of work my way through it until you land on somebody that's the right fit for you.
Now, you mentioned that you also have, you bank at a different location or a different bank than where a lot of your lines of credit are at.
Mm-hmm.
How, from a logistics standpoint, how easy is it to access those funds and move funds around?
It's very easy because the lines of credit are set up through a bank, and whoever my lender is partnered up with that bank. Gosh, I can't even remember the name of the last bank. I think it's the Bank of Indiana is the other bank that we're using right now for the first lien HELOC. Financial Bank of Indiana, something along those lines, is who actually holds that debt. So we just have a portal, an account that goes into it, and it essentially operates just like a bank account, right? Think of a line of credit like a credit card, but this operates as cash. I can do whatever I want with it. So if that means I need to Zelle myself or transfer money over to my Chase account, I can go ahead and do that. And it happens the same exact day. It's instantaneous. If I need to write a check to my contractors, they give you checkbooks, they give you credit cards, they give you all the things you need. And it's just all managed out of that one bank portal, essentially.
How dependent is this method on the representatives that you're dealing with at the institution? And I raise this question because we've all had calls with the big banks, the small banks, whatever it is, and we've had great experiences and we've had terrible experiences. It seems to me that an institution's product is only as good as the representative's knowledge and ability to sell the thing, right? So when you're working with, and I know you're marketing, you're growing these relationships with these bank representatives, and when one leaves, which can happen, how much does that mean? Well, it's time to go look for another bank. How much leeway do you give kind of that institution to see who they're going to replace? This person you've had a great relationship with?
That's a great question. Yeah. And this recently happened with Zach, actually. So the guy that he was going to, Zach Keeps here locally, who I mentioned earlier, the person he was going to, his go-to person, left the bank. And then the new representative that went in place, had about 1% of the knowledge as that last guy did. So it made things really challenging because you're trying to have all these conversations and they're just not up to speed the way that this other person was that had been there for a decade. So I would give the opportunity to explore who else is at the company, who else you can work with, who else knows what they're talking about. But in the same breath too, don't be closed-minded to the idea of, okay, maybe I just need to go search for another bank. Maybe I just got to find that person. Even when it came to us setting up because my wife and I, we have a corporate structure and we wanted our bank accounts to be a very specific way for our personal and business finances, not even talking about the lines of credit here. Even when it came down to the way we wanted our bank accounts set up, I went to 4 different Chase banks. I went to 3 different Wells Fargos. I went to 2 different Bank of Americas, and nobody could set up the bank accounts in the system that we wanted in the way that we wanted it to be, until we had one guy at one Chase bank that happened to know what we were talking about because he works with a lot of other business people. And he said, I know exactly what you're looking for. I can do this. This is what it's going to look like. And he was able to push the whole process through. So building the relationships is huge, and then maintaining those, but also see if there's anybody else right now that, hey, if anything ever happens, please let me know so I know who I can reach out to next. The relationships that I currently have right now, they would tell me, hey, look, I'm going to be leaving my job. They would shoot me a text. This is who I think you should be reaching out to moving forward with. I got them caught up to speed on everything that you're doing. So making sure that you're just maintaining those relationships. They're incredible relationships for you to have. And anytime they come out with new products or new features or anything like that too, you'll be the first person that they call.
Yeah, it really seems to me to illustrate the point of how important it is to be cultivating multiple relationships with representatives at these institutions. Because if you've got your boat hitched to, the one, great deal maker that's getting these things done and understands a product, and they get a job and they move somewhere else, you're basically done, or could be done for the foreseeable future until you can find those people. So really important.
Well, and everything's figure outable in my mind. You know what I mean? I love that phrase, because it's just a matter of, okay, where do I have to pivot to now? What's the next move for me? You can figure it out. There's other banks that are out there. I'm sure there's banks out there that I'm not using that give me way better terms, way better rates, way better everything than what I'm doing right now. But I found what works for me, and I like sticking with those people, and they're the people that push everything through the way that I need it to be done.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, we really appreciate you taking the time with us. This has been awesome information. Tell our listeners how they can find and connect with you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And please connect with me. The best place to connect with me is going to be on Instagram. So my Instagram is at Stephen Hunt, STEVENHUNT. You can shoot me a DM on there. I always respond to my DMs there. I'm not a huge texter. I'd rather just talk to everybody on social media. Facebook, not the best place either. So just go straight for the Instagram, you guys. Hit the follow button, shoot me a DM. Let's talk about things. I'll give you any resources that you need. Anything that I've used, I'm happy to share it with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks again so much, Stephen Hunt. Let's do it again soon sometime.
Let's do it. Absolutely. I'll give you guys a status update on how all of it's going.
All right. We appreciate that. We'll see you again. All right, everybody. That is our show. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to join us this afternoon for the Creative Finance Collective, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good day, everyone.